Calling LEGO Batman 2 DC Superheroes a big deal for TT's Lego Adaptation Games is an understatement. It perhaps brought more big-scale, long-term changes to the series than any others until the Skywalker saga, and one could even argue that the sensibilities of that one so many years later still stemmed from certain seeds first planted in Batman 2. It was the first true open world, pushing past the advancement of Indy 2's wider sandboxes and warts-on-your-hog castle/Britain lands interconnected but slower unfolding worlds of those games. It swapped mumbling for actual spoken dialogue from heavy hitters like Clancy Brown, and further was still one of the few written as a wholly original plot. Certainly the first of this tier. And the thing isn't just that it did these things, but that it did them well. While sure, later open worlds had even more packed within them, Gotham was as fun to explore as it was brilliantly atmospheric, dark, and brooding, and neon, and a little silly, all at the same time. And it wasn't just an excuse plot with childish gags to jingle keys in front of the kiddos, it actually had character arcs and humor that worked on multiple layers. It might even still be the best original plot TT wrote, honestly. And I've said it before, I'll stick to it, still the best Superman game ever made. So yeah, Batman 2 is a big deal, in the same sense that I would be a bit anxious if Killer Croc went down on me. So it only felt like due time to turn my attention to our divergent handheld ports again, as I have done for Star Wars Indy, Friends, and the first Batman before. LEGO Batman 2 has quite the wide range of specs, going as old hardware as the Nintendo DS, while also being on my beloved PS Vita, the Nintendo 3DS, and smartphones with both iOS and Android support. Most of the footage will be that of the Vita here. I actually had to figure out how to modify the device to trick it into thinking it's a webcam in OBS so I could record it. The headphone jack audio recording is pretty mediocre, so I just recorded externally through my normal microphone and prayed the fan on my computer, or me occasionally coughing like a Victorian orphan faking tuberculosis to fit in with the rest of the kids, wouldn't overwhelm things if I had to cut to footage with audio. Thankfully, there was no game audio that required inclusion for today's video. No secret farts, thank fucking Christ. So it was a non-issue this time. If anyone smarter than me knows a better workaround for future games where it would be a dilemma, let me know in the comments. Now, at this point, the 3DS and Vita both have some decent power running things, the latter even capable of fully 3D open-world experiences like Assassin's Creed and The Amazing Spider-Man. So an optimist might think we'd be in for the most advanced handheld LEGO experience yet. The fool. Much like LEGO Star Wars 3, this is all still based on the power of the lowest common denominator on the Nintendo DS. So that version is the baseline, with certain things merely upscaled from there. Yes, these limitations do start to get kind of long in the tooth here, but they actually get worse for a few later LEGO entries, though that's irrelevant today. Previous videos highlighted the ways these constraints led to changes, as they will today, but the whole design mentality this time actually has to resemble at least the surface level of levels, since there's now stricter adherence to at least some cutscenes, so the plot still makes sense. Batman 2 can't play it nearly as fast and loose as Batman 1. But that intention to bring complementary differences is still present. You'll see, we'll get into it. The most noteworthy change is the tragic omission of the open world. This is a classic LEGO experience in the sense of a simple hub you access levels through. Again, the Batcave. And this hub is pretty bare bones as far as they go. Layout is laid out to resemble the story's layout, though obviously smaller than the version we will see on console or even in the levels, since you climb up to higher ground there. After the first DS port's multi-layered Batcave with a handful of rooms, plus Arkham's own several rooms to explore, it does feel pretty small to be limited to barely more than a straight line of things to explore and select from. There's also a distinct visual style to the loading screens and menus, this hard-edged, somewhat minimalist comic booky design, and I don't exactly love it. Despite sometimes looking pretty decent, it veers too quickly into looking kiddish or just plain ugly, often involving Batman's face. I miss the style of the art from the first DS port. I can't post this shit to hard images. Additionally, music presentation is slightly different. While still implementing and based heavily around Danny Elfman's Batman tracks and John Williams' Superman score, the full game actually has some original music pieces throughout. The handheld port lacks those tracks over gameplay, using only a selection of the movie scores. The Superman music always feels fitting, but I do think Elfman's work without the new pieces in the mix does mildly start to feel like a mismatch, though admittedly this is quibbling, and I'm not even entirely sure why. It works stupid well for the original Lego Batman. Maybe the lack of dialogue there lets that version feel more like a blank slate for any interpretation of the hero. I don't remember this bothering me before, so perhaps I've just been burdened by Elfman's own lazy self-plagiarizing of his earlier work on Justice League. And before all the elf heads come crawling up my ass about that one, that's still not the worst allegation of things Danny perhaps plausibly did in a window between 2015 and 2024, and I too will willingly cut this whole gag from the public video if he pays me $830,000. Gameplay certainly works to keep things moving, with beefy enough levels to typically keep you occupied 15 to 30 minutes each. The bones of levels, and even much of the meat on them, more directly adapts the main port than ever before seen in these videos, and similarly, characters with main port comparisons more predictably resemble that version, unlike the wild ability swap of the last handheld port, though there's still plenty of changes. Even Batman and Robin have some noteworthy differences. This time, some abilities are folded directly into their default suits. The Bat suit, with a space, is absent, and so is one of its two abilities with Sonic Shattering, which is absent for yet another handheld port. However, the gliding is kept in for the default Batsuit, without a space. This change would actually carry over directly into LEGO Batman 3. The power suit giving rockets and strength, and the sensor suit giving stealth and X-ray vision carry through comparatively unchanged, though not entirely. For the power suit, fair warning, you are no longer safe from your own explosions. You will explodify yourself if you stand too close. The sensor suit containing a cape also gets gliding, though if you glide invisibly, you glide at tiptoe speed, and I don't think that makes any sense within what I understand about physics, but whatever. Robin's acrobatic suit is gone, with his acrobatics being available in his default suit, and his balls never being available. His magnet suit is tweaked. Other than the obvious visual changes of magnetic surfaces resembling the original game more than the new shiny blue of this console port, he also cannot move metal objects around with his magnet, and it remains for just wall walking. Though, to pick up the slack and give the second ability all of the suits are supposed to have, you can hold down the ability button for a manually activated stud magnet while wearing it. His hazard and ice suits are otherwise unchanged. Moving to the other heroes that eventually join the story demonstrates the other changes to abilities. Superman's suite of heat vision and ice breath are identical, barring the cosmetic change of laser-cutting walls remaining red from the previous Hirsute Potter game, instead of being gold like the rest of the heat destructibles. But there is an incredibly obvious nerf to flight in this game. You can't just fly willy-nilly here, and it's weirdly more like Mandalorian jetpacks in the earliest of the LEGO games, where you just hover a set distance above the ground and will lose height shortly after flying over a pit. The only flight higher than that is at grappling points, or at designated places shown by arrows on the walls. Maybe it's to work around how much this port hella loves invisible walls, but it is legitimately the most disappointing nerf in the game. Green Lantern retains Green Brick exclusivity, but also actually gains a ranged move, and not only that, focusing it for just a second can even destroy silver bricks, a buff likewise shared by Aquaman. Flash weirdly moves at normal speed if you aren't holding the ability button, compared to being fast by default on console, but also has some buffs. First is Speed Force treadmills, which likewise appear here before the full version of LEGO Batman 3 brings it to home systems, and then he can aim himself like a projectile, also something he could do later on console, and here used for his stuns. He also has, grappling, where he can run up grappling locations. He runs on the nothing. Some characters have a combat-only ability to stun enemies. For some, it's just a pepper spray type attack, but for others like Martian Manhunter, it is a psychic attack. Weirdly, the characters who are supposed to have sonic screams have just been given the psychic attack instead. Black Canary is not psychic. Man-Bat is not psychic. Was it really too much work to use the sound effect the main port already used, and move the energy effect 4 millimeters down to start at their mouths instead of their foreheads? As per handheld port precedence, there is a touchscreen access minigame. Characters with plausible tech access abilities play this little memory puzzle where you just remember where to put green, yellow, or red icons. It's pretty easy, and made even easier, since roughly 95% of the time, they only ever give you 2 of the colors anyway. Now, even with fewer abilities shuffled, there are some characters further tweaked around beyond those I covered earlier, like Two-Face keeping bombs, and Harley keeping her pop gun from the last handheld port. Lex gets a grappling hook and a normal gun, in addition to his normal deconstructor. Joker loses his machine gun for a revolver, but gains his exploding pies like he uses through the story, which seems like an obvious omission in the main version. There are also a sprinkle of visual differences between characters in both versions this time too. Flash's mask has an open chin here. Perhaps this will be a hot take with how many people I've seen nostalgic for the fictional piece used in the full game, but I'll just say it. It looks too much like a bucket. So this is a mild improvement on handheld. Thankfully, LEGO would never make the repeated mistake of producing disproportionately bigger and bigger minifigure headpieces in real life. I'm not looking at that. Or that. I mean, this one's starting to grow on me some. Lex bots are significantly different as full minifigures instead of thinner Battledroid-esque bodies, and I really like these. I think they look dope as hell in this version. Mr. Freeze still has a printed torso instead of his actual physical piece, like the DS port of the last game, but this time it has more detail included as well. Penguin has full-length legs, which disturbs me more than I expected, and Sinestro's arms are now yellow instead of black. At risk of that last one being kind of boring, let's move on. On to the topic of combat. Someone in TT Fusion clearly wanted to take combat, air quotes, more seriously than the faster, looser combat more typical of the series back then. All enemies do take slightly more regular hits to defeat if you don't grab them first, with either takedowns by using attack after grabbing, or throws, which did not make the full version, by pressing the ability button after grabbing, depending on if you want them defeated here or over there. Unlike the console version, you cannot carry thugs around once you have grabbed them. Also unique, some enemies are tougher and can resist grabs, even from super strength characters. Normal fucking clowns can brush off Superman's grabs. This game's power scaling is whack. Some enemies are even tougher than that, and can block normal attacks and grab you back. but you might overlook them if you're not being a completionist, as they're used in a pretty limited capacity. This is where stuns come in. These can be done with batarang-style weapons, ground pounds for the characters that have them, those aforementioned dedicated stun moves, or throwing an already grabbed enemy at them. Then you can grab or take them down. The problem is that this is not a great change, as it introduces more quibbles than any engagement it brings. For one, this port has more of a delay in being able to pull out and aim your batarang than the near-instant speed of the primary version, so you need great range before goons get up in your junk. And getting hit will break your aiming, so that's not preferential, and you're probably better just spamming attack until they perish, if your character doesn't have the other options. Stuns also aren't always great at taking, where they're stunned for picoseconds before being back to normal, and sometimes when they are stunned, the animation to take them down misses, and you kick air, and then they are unstunned again. Don't get me wrong, it's cool to see someone tried something here, but it just slows combat down too much. And since it doesn't tweak ranged weapons like guns to do more damage, it just makes it preferential to fall back on the abilities that can cheese combat faster. If I could hit them with a bomb, or freeze and instantly shatter them, I would always fall back on those instead of engaging with the systems here. Beyond just the obvious lack of vehicles and the obvious lack of an open world, vehicle segments have been nearly entirely eliminated, barring exactly one vestigial little moment, and it's kind of cumbersome in a way I wish they'd just excised it completely. At the start of the level chasing Lex Luthor's Juggernaut, the Batmobile has one ranged attack and one ranged explosive, and Robin on motorcycle can only use his grappling hook. The Batmobile explosive has to be used to destroy a couple of things, but won't work on enemies, so you have to switch to the slow ranged attack, while they fire at whatever goddamn speed they desire. Robin is completely defenseless when you have to switch to him, and then you just have to dodge explosives with very little wiggle room until the game decides it's time to move forward. It's purely no more than obnoxious. Being at the start of the level means you have no studs to lose, but you have to do it every time you play that level. Genuinely, I would have preferred the entire absence of vehicles to this. There is one additional gameplay mode unlocked by beating the story. I've elected to move that section to after the story changes, for reasons. Collectibles are all present here in a way that exceeds expectations personally. Each level contains 5 minikits, 1 red brick, and 1 soundbite, which just unlocks lines villains say in the open world of the main port before you kick the shit out of them. That one's whatever. Not bad, but nothing I'm going gaga over. But the execution on the rest is great. This time, each individual minikit unlocks a new character, so you really get some instant gratification finding these. No more complete the whole set bullshit. You just get stuff right away. Red bricks have a good selection, even though they are slightly truncated from console. No one is missing beep beep without proper vehicles to beep beep after all, and with no hidden gold bricks or citizens in peril in this version, their respective extras are out. Disguise, Fall Rescue, extra toggle character studs, Vine Grapple, and extra hearts are also removed. Friend Grab is technically not an extra here, but is a default part of gameplay, so you are able to abuse Player 2 to your heart's content. You and I both know you love torturing your partner. Sorry, I had to have a moment in case my ex was cyberstalking me again. Joke's on you, asshole. You can't isolate and gaslight me in LEGO Batman 2. What we do have still covers all bases nicely, and even has some exclusives. Stud multipliers get the full suite of 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 without omissions, plus Stud Magnet for efficient money-making. Side note, if you play on mobile, they take away multipliers from your options, trying to coerce you into paying more real-world money for packs that unlock handfuls of characters early, and you will have to farm studs to unlock everyone naturally. It wildly unbalances everything, and so I'd recommend literally any other version instead if you have the choice. Back to extras. Minikits and red bricks do get detectors, leaving sound bites out in the cold, but I never needed the help finding all one in each level, so it's fine. These detectors aren't even all that good, since instead of the blinking arrows, it just shows you a ghost version right next to where you will actually find it, which you'll probably already know when you're looking at something that clearly requires an ability you didn't have in story mode. Regenerate hearts and invincibility are both here for dying less. There's fast build to build fast, and grapple expert, which allows you to grab any enemy without needing to stun them first. Big heads is self-explanatory and always a fun addition to any game. I can't believe we're in the year of our Lord and Savior Quetzalcoatl 2026, and still not all games offer big head mode. I love getting big heads plural. Also singular, but that's different. And since I'm being a lecher anyway, the last one is Super Goons. I bet you want to have some Super Goons, don't ya? Actually, you're going to be disappointed with your Super Goons. It's supposed to make the enemies tougher for a further challenge, but unfortunately, upon testing in different levels with different playable characters, they appeared to deal the same damage and take the same number of hits as far as I could tell. Fella's always promising to demolish you so hard, only to collapse 4 impacts in, shaking my damn head. The biggest strength of this port is the expanded roster. There's so much unique goon action here. Yeah, I know I just used that joke. What if I told you one of these was a boner goon, though? Still nothing? Fine. I'll go over the exciting ones. A few return from the last handheld port, or the last game more generally. Classic blue Batman is back, as is the original 2006 black and white minifigure for Two-Face, and Robin's older version, sort of. The hair isn't the piece they used in the first game, though it is a piece that was available in one of the sets with him, and they accidentally swapped the colors of his hips and legs. Whoopsie. Tropical Joker also gets adapted, updating his face to the 2012 version otherwise used here, his hat to a purple version of the Indiana Jones fedora, and unlike the DS port of the first game, his toes are no longer out. Very sorry, foot freaks. Black Mask returns, losing his suit jacket for a white shirt and black tie. Talia is back in 2, but in her black jumpsuit look instead of a white blouse. Lucius Fox is made over to more closely resemble the Morgan Freeman version, losing his glasses and wearing a more casual suit and bow tie. He's not useless this time, he also has pipe bombs now. That feels a bit wrong. Azrael's mantle has shifted from Jean-Paul Valley to Michael Lane wearing the Suit of Sorrows, both giving a nice hint of the larger Batman world moving ever forward between games, and showing that the Crusades did happen in this universe, where this very set of armor, during one such crusade, caused a knight to go insane and wantonly slaughter numerous innocents. Convenient insane wanton slaughter segue, Mr. Zsasz is back, and more terrifying than ever. His kill count has skyrocketed from 40 victims last time to, based on the most clear tally count I can get from these graphics, only ambiguous because some of the marks on his back aren't entirely clear, an excess of 225 just from those marks we can see. Holy fuck. It's no wonder he's gotten more effective, as beyond just having the grappling hook, still terrifying, he can now turn invisible. The serial killer can grapple up to you anywhere, and you wouldn't even know it, because he's invisible. I am never sleeping again. Thanks, Lego Batman 2. Some of the DLC characters from the console port are included by default, which is super cool. Nightwing, Katana, Shazam, and Captain Cold, who dual wields cold guns for some reason. However, the rest of the DLC characters aren't included, making the first of these videos where the handheld port lacked major named characters. Damian Wayne, Zatanna, Bizarro, Black Manta, Gorilla Grodd, and Black Adam are not ported over. Remaining exclusives are brand new to the series. Green Arrow, who is perpetually one of my favorites, as is my likewise favorite Deadshot, though his minifigure design is a bit less cool than Arrow's because his helmet is weirdly too square from some angles. Oh Christ, he's a Funko Pop! Robin gets his Red Robin outfit, and Wonder Woman gets her civilian look as Diana Prince, though this is weirdly less useful than her normal self as she doesn't get her ranged tiara. This is especially strange as playing as her normally, she doesn't even take off her tiara, she just pulls out a second one to throw. There's Vixen, Lady Shiva, and the Louise Lincoln version of Killer Frost, to add several classic women. Editor's note, so if it sounds different, it's because it is different. I forgot to mention that Superboy was exclusive to this port, so I'm sticking him in the list here. Second to last, but certainly not second to least, Red Hood, who appropriately gets all of Robin's default abilities, plus bombs and 2 actually unique pistols. And finally, Deathstroke. Between these and all of the shared roster otherwise, we actually had what was the best playable roster in a DC game at the time, and that's something that I did not take for granted. More broadly, this was a decent era for quality of life improvements for the LEGO handhelds. You could quit a level and keep your progress on studs and collectibles at any time you so chose, and you could pull up and switch to anyone in the roster whenever you saw fit. With these niceties though, extra rough edges start to get especially noticeable. The roster isn't the most efficient to scroll through, with just a few characters on each page, and the way the game doesn't distribute the initial free play selection in each level with a good spread of all abilities, you'll be spending a while manually swapping out characters, and even then, you'll sometimes just be inexplicably unable to swap out a character because it won't let you select the roster icon at all. Sometimes you have to switch to someone else to pull up the roster, and sometimes you have to walk to a different spot altogether to do so. There are a few unique combat takedowns for a few different characters, but the game's actually extraordinarily bad at triggering those, so if you play as a wide spread of characters, by 100% completion, you will have seen the unique moves maybe once or twice maximum, and instead almost always just watch the one where they hammer someone into the ground on loop. Though not the first time these ports make the following mistake, nor the most egregious considering characters like Deadshot, if you highlight multiple targets with a gun, the one bullet just boomerangs the entire selection, which just feels lazy. The rough charm that these ports had early on the DS was worn thin by the time of this game, and it just helps to remind you how polished the bigger versions had become. I don't really need to do a proper story time, that can happen during a briefish history someday, but I will touch on some interesting level changes. There are quite a few cutscenes missing. Most prominently Vicky Vale's news reports, though the opening red carpet scene, several fleshing out Lex and Joker's main plot, some fleshing out the Justice League, and even the scene explaining why the Justice League finally arrives near the end, are all gone, to really reduce the context of why things are happening throughout. It's not indecipherable, but it is like watching a movie cut down to be aired on TV to fit in an allotted window, where you can tell things are a little different. There are a few boss changes to the opening theater level. Harley's fight has been tweaked so that you take her down with electricity, which I only highlight because later adaptations have shown she gets off to electroshock, and I like to ruin things for people. Instead of Two-Face's fight, you actually fight Penguin here. A poster outside the theater shows the first game's version of Bruce Wayne for an extra bit of continuity, before cutting the Batwing gameplay and the punchline portion of Joker's deliberately overly long, "You like ex-Batman" gags, since the Batwing never crashes here to show the rest of that cutscene. The maze in Arkham Asylum is much calmer, as the villains politely park to fight you on foot, where you spray poison ivy right in the face with fucking weed killer, and you have an invisible stealth versus stealth fight against Catwoman before finally fighting Two-Face, who was moved here to have an exclusive encounter on a dam that apparently just exists at Arkham Asylum. Inside the asylum proper, you get a veritable boss rush, properly encountering Mr. Freeze, Mad Hatter mind-controlling a bunch of thugs, and even Victor Zsasz for another of those stealth boss fights, before a heavily changed version of the Scarecrow gas fight, which was the only of these present in the main port. Having taken down so much of Batman's rogues gallery, the changes do get subtler and less worth highlighting for a couple levels, investigating and pursuing Lex and Joker, though we do start to see discrepancies where cutscenes show suits not actually present in this port. Our next big change finally comes in with Lex's evil receptionist, who is no longer just an elite Lexbot, but an entire humongous mecha. The portion with the giant Joker robot gets an unexpected addition, where it reacts, interestingly, to you shooting it in the butthole. I'm not sure that's a look of displeasure. We do lose one entire level per vehicular lacking, bringing the total down to 14 for this port. Once the Justice League finally assembles, this version immediately breaks the group right back down into smaller numbers for different parts of the levels, but there is a brief scene I quite like where you grapple up to the top of an elevator right before a thug ambushes you and just guns into the now empty elevator. Also, Cyborg's loading screen look, despite not matching his in-game design, is actually based on his classic original look, which I do respect. Finally, and a bit anticlimactically, there's a painfully simplified final boss fight against Lex in his warsuit. This unlocks the Justice League mode. In it, you go through a series of combat rooms, one at a time as preset Leaguers, and you're ranked based on your number of deaths. There is a strategy to it all, even balancing characters with regenerating hearts and leaving smashable environmental objects for a chance to heal characters who can't heal on their own. Individual rounds are even uniquely designed for each character, and it requires you know the finer nuances of the sport's specific take on combat and doing things like prioritizing ranged enemies, or using stealth whenever available. It's certainly interesting, though sadly, as the combat here is, as discussed, mediocre, it's not necessarily that hooking, and since you can't choose who fights when or where, there's little replayability once you've ranked gold. And though not hard in the sense of actually harder games, there are some frustrations to get through a few of them, especially Gotham Metro, which bears the weight of unbalanced design. There are tons of the enemies who can grab you, where you are guaranteed to take at least one heart of damage no matter how quickly you escape. Flash's section is entirely against ranged characters without smooth enough maneuverability to properly dodge, and so by the time you're facing an end boss against Zsasz, now joined by endlessly spawning grope thugs, you will likely be teetering on enough deaths to go down a rank. Even being able to turn invisible until attacking, you'll be sweating until it's through. Credit where it is due, I guess. They did make him one of the most tense boss fights in the franchise here, even if it was by making his stakes higher per insufficient playtesting. The best one is definitely Arkham Nightmare, not just because it's balanced well enough to be a breeze, but because it has the best atmosphere for this purpose, darting in and out of fear gas sections, even showing Martian Manhunter's pyrophobia, and Batman fighting a gaggle of Jokers in his hallucinatory state. Not to spoil Arkham Knight, but that's what happens in Arkham Knight at one point. I am telling you guys, Lego Batman is the blueprint. This one is also a good place to farm if you are playing on mobile. It's easy to get to Green Lantern's section at the end without deaths, and since he heals, and it keeps spawning enemies until you defeat the Stingers, just keep the Stingers killing all of the enemies and collect their money. A gold score will triple your studs, so just do that as long as you like, and get 3 times the profit. A couple of other maps had moments worth mentioning. In particular, the first one, where Green Arrow fights 2 inexplicable jokers on rocket turrets, and the last one, which does reuse the final boss, except Brainiac is the one in the cockpit. All in all, I can't overwhelmingly recommend this port like I can for LEGO Batman on the Nintendo DS. Hell, more than a few people prefer that one to the console game, and that's really not going to be the case for this one. Still, I do think there is enough here to serve as a complimentary experience, especially with all of the extra bosses and the great cast, and if you are on Vita, it's at least another simple, fun Platinum trophy. Maybe just play this one with some space between the full version, so that the contrast isn't so stark. I would really like to stop dying at the end of my Batman videos. Thank you. Very special thanks are due to my patrons. You all have remained extraordinarily patient with me, as I've been slowly getting back in the saddle following some very intense personal traumas, and I deeply, deeply appreciate your support during this time. If you would like to support with these fine folks, you can do so for as low as $1 a month through my Patreon. I do have a couple other ways that you can support. One-time donations can be done through Ko-fi, also linked down below. And there are my various socials. If you want to follow me on those, that's another way to give me a little bit of extra support. Finally, I've included a couple of links down there. I ended up publishing a couple of books processing through my traumas and the things I dealt with last year, so if you're interested in a copy, you can order those print on demand. One of them is a book of poetry. The other is a book that lacks pants. I'll let you go and look for yourself if you're intrigued. Regardless, thanks to everyone who has helped me through this time, and I look forward to having you around for future videos.